Dear brothers and sisters, knowledge is power. In the past, government officials have always manipulated and altered any type of information regarding our extraterrestrial family, where they can control everybody by instigating fear. There are still people out there that don't want to accept the truth.
My name, as I said, was Paul Hellyer. I'm a former Minister of National Defence for Canada. I served in 3 governments during a total of 23 and a half years as a Member of Parliament. I had sighting reports of UFOs, and what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know.
Citizens of the world, we know that the truth is so awful that it is hard to accept, but until you know the truth, you cannot move on.
Something strange was spotted in the sky above Pike County Tuesday.
At this point, there's still no explanation as to what it was, and people are left wondering what's flying over their heads.
And so I thought, well, there's a shiny helicopter or plane hovering up there. I'm going to look at it. I got my binoculars out, and when I looked through the binoculars, I was stunned. This was no helicopter, and this was no plane. And in fact, this is what I saw.
For 2.5 hours, he watched and photographed this object as it hung in the air until eventually it disappeared.
Just there, like, you know, this.
On December 30th, Lauren Harris was on Highway 59 in Cleveland when a brightly lit cylinder hovering in the sky caused her to pull over.
Strange, like the lights were pulsating on it and it would disappear for a few seconds and it would reappear in the same spot. And then we noticed too that it wasn't moving at all. So we're like, no, that can't be an airplane, and what would a helicopter be doing this late at night over the woods? I think it was a UFO.
The nursing student says she tried to document the encounter.
I had my phone up like this and I tried taking a picture of it, and then I put it back down and it was gone.
カメラ交代してもらっていい？カメラ？寒い。あっちの一つ下にもう一個あるよ。うん。あ、また近づいていってる。うん。いや、さっきみたいに消えるかな。なんでこれ？ あ、上から来た。
すごい。すごいね。
それはね。増えてる増えてる増えてる。
増えた増えた。
もう一個増えた。
うん。
これはスクープだ。1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、9体。違うよ。1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10、11、11なんだよ。よく見たら光が3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10、11、本当だ。あ、消えた。1個消えた。あ、あっちも消えた。あ、また消えそう。
今度は県庁の上に映ってる。すごいびっくり。なんだろうあれ。あのさ、さっきはロージェルの上だったわけよ。
いや、これ見たことがない。
UFO かもな。今ちょうど映してるよ。
嘘でしょ。
だからさ、だからよ。県庁の上に来た。
飛行機飛ぶよ。なんだろう。動いてないね。何？テレビ局に電話してる。
不思議だね。落ちた。
Well, lights up in the sky aren't really that unusual around the new year.
However, some Cleveland residents say they saw something more than your typical firework display.
Dr. Turner presents 8 detailed abduction accounts from women in Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, New York, and Puerto Rico, as well as an update on the events she and her husband have both experienced. Some of the little-known events discussed include medical, sexual, psychological, and metaphysical procedures. In addition to these alien contacts, several of the women also tell of surveillance, intrusion, even abductions by U.S. military personnel. And so now, all the way to Arkansas, and to Dr. Carla Turner. Dr. Turner, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Art. Nice to be with you.
Dr. Turner, apparently all this began then with an experience you had.
Well, actually, it began with an experience my husband had. As far as our coming to having to deal with this, being aware of ongoing activities that once we began to investigate, of course, like most people who've had these experiences, we learned that they went back to childhood. But being aware of what they were, that did begin really with a sighting in December of 1987 of a spherical metallic object. And there was missing time when I went up on the hill to watch.
How much of a description did he have of the object beyond spherical? In other words, how close was it?
was less than 2 miles away, much less probably.
Wow.
The object was hanging above the courthouse, stationary. There was no movement, no sound, but it was a burnished metallic color, coppery colored. It seemed to be a total sphere, complete sphere. And it was fairly large, given that it was that close, if it was as close as it appeared to be, which was right over the center of town. And he watched it trying to figure out what the object might be, a weather balloon or even a movie prop. As I mentioned in the book, we lived in an area near Dallas where movies were often made on location. And it really, that was all he thought he was seeing, but he watched it for what he consciously perceived to be less than 10 minutes, and when he turned around to walk back down the hill because he'd given up on figuring it out, a significant amount of time had apparently passed he hadn't been aware of, and it was almost dark, whereas it had been quite daylight when he had gone up the hill.
Wow. So then how much time are we talking about?
Probably 45 minutes or so.
45 minutes?
Yeah, probably. Somewhere around there, depends on what time. We'd have to go back and look at, measuring the times. We're just guessing because
Sure.
It was daylight when he went up there. It was almost dark when he turned around. And
So then how did he digest all this?
he didn't. He told me about it. I wasn't with him. He told me about it. He wasn't overly excited. He was curious because he had never seen anything like it, and he had no explanation. As I said, he didn't even think the word UFO. When he talked about it with me, that never was even mentioned. We assumed it was a movie prop and looked in the newspapers, treated it very ordinarily. But a couple of days later, he did have an unusual event. He found a scabbed-over deep incision on the back of his leg, and he got extremely angry about it for no apparent reason. He didn't know how he got it. It had not been there that he'd been aware of at least very long, because he just found it when it was scabbing and beginning to itch, as a scab will do sometimes.
Sure.
On the evening of November 5th, 1975, a 7-man crew was piling into a 4-wheel drive vehicle after finishing a day of woodcutting near the tiny northern Arizona community of Snowflake. One of the 7 men was Travis Walton, whose curiosity that night plunged him into a living nightmare he would never forget. Just before leaving the work area, the men in the Jeep watched a glowing object emerge from behind the trees. Travis opened a door to get a better view and continued watching, stunned with his companions.
The thing was about 90 feet away, about 20 feet in diameter, about 8 feet high. It was glowing a golden color, kind of like molten metal. I couldn't hear anything at first. When I got closer, I could hear it, but it was a high-pitched, intermittent sound and a low rumbling sound. It sounded like machinery or, a heavy mechanical sound. Very difficult to describe.
Travis got out of the vehicle and moved toward the object, despite cries from his friends for him to return. Walton assumed by the time he could get any closer, the object would be gone.
Just as I got up close, it started to move with a sort of a rocking motion, kind of like a spinning top, like when it's slowing down to fall over, except it wasn't spinning. The same side stayed toward me. And when it started to move, it got real loud, and that really scared me. And I jumped down behind a log, and I looked up at this thing, and I decided then I was in a lot of danger, and I was going to get the heck out of there. And I raised up to go. It's the last thing I remember. I raised up and I started to turn, and I was just about in a high crouch when, wham, I felt a numbing shock hit me. It kind of like in the head, and I went out. I was knocked unconscious.
His 6 co-workers, however, saw what Travis had not. A slender beam of intense light which shot from the craft and lifted Walton off his feet, knocking him to the ground. The rest of the crew sped away in panic, looking back to see the craft take off. But when they returned to see if Travis was all right, he was nowhere to be found. When Travis finally came to, he was weak, groggy, and in pain. Above him was a light. He assumed he was in a hospital bed, but as his blurred vision became clearer, he discovered he was wrong. As his eyes became accustomed to the surroundings, Travis saw his captors in more detail.
They were about 4 feet 10. Had very large heads, no hair on their heads, no eyebrows, no whiskers or anything like that. They had very large eyes. Those eyes are something that really bothered me worse than anything. I jumped off the table there and staggered over into the corner. There was a bench across the wall, and I leaned there. I was really weak, and I was so scared, I was shaking, and they started towards me, and I started just screaming at them, telling them to keep away from me. And I reached over and I grabbed a thing off of the table. They were lashed out at them with it, and I kept screaming. They only took a couple of steps, and they stopped.
After the creatures departed, Travis left the room through the same door.
I turned, and there was a man standing in the doorway I came through. And this guy, he appeared human to me, which was a big relief. And I ran up there and started asking him all kinds of questions. And he just smiled, kind of tolerant-like. And I assumed that maybe he couldn't hear me because he had the helmet on his head. He had a clear helmet. And so when he motioned for me, he took me by the arm. I went with him. I assumed I was being rescued.
Travis was led out of the craft and into a large hangar where more human-like figures were present. He remembers their appearance this way.
They'd pass, on the street, but they had a strange thing to their eyes. They were a golden hazel, and they had a resemblance to each other, like a family, but not identical. One of the men and the woman came over there, and they put me on the table, and they put a mask over my face, and I started to resist, and they held me on the table, and they put this mask on my face, and I reached up to pull it away, and before I could, everything went black.
Meanwhile, the other members of the woodcutting crew had reported Walton missing. Local police organized a search party, but no trace of Walton was found. The next thing he remembered, Travis was lying on the side of a road outside Heber, Arizona, 12 miles from Snowflake.
When I first regained consciousness, I was laying on the roadway, to the side of the road, more off than on. And my head was on my arm, and I saw a light, and I looked up. Then I saw this object hovering there. It was a flattened sphere. It was shaped like a disc, but it was very shiny, chrome-like. I could see that reflecting everything around there, but not giving off any light. It was dark. And it was just there for a second, hovering about 4 feet off the ground. And then it just shot straight up without making a sound.
Travis staggered to a phone booth to call his family, who at first did not believe it was really him. But once convinced, they came to take him home. On the way, Travis received yet another shock.
We were riding back in, and they said something about everybody being worried about me. I can't remember the exact conversation, but I said, well, it must have been a bad couple of hours or something, to reference the time or something like that. And they said, Travis, you've been gone for 5 days.
Fletcher Gray from MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, is investigating.
I have verified over 345 cases.
Gray looks into reports of extraterrestrial vehicles, alien encounters, and aircraft modeled after alien vehicles not acknowledged by the government.
This was verified by 2 independent witnesses. This is a UFO because we don't know if it belongs to extraterrestrial or if it's one of our own. Here's a lady that supposedly had a transplant where she'd been abducted. These ETs, or extraterrestrials, are moving from one star system to the next.
Gray believes a Cleveland police officer saw the same thing Harris did, and he's trying to obtain dash cam video. He's also looking into this reported sighting in Houston. His message to UFO observers: don't be afraid to speak up.
Who do you tell without them looking at you like you ain't wrapped too tight?
And I was a part of a United States Air Force cover-up for 18 years.
What we are attempting to achieve is a device which defeats the perpendicular force of gravity.
When we look at our data, we lost 7% of weight.
We now have the technology to take ET home.
Consciousness is at once the most familiar thing to us and the most mysterious.
It doesn't take much effort if you just clear your mind.
People are afraid of looking at technology.
Paul Brown stuff got basically suppressed for many years.
He got murdered.
The problem is not proving that UFOs exist.
It's when you begin to expose the energy and propulsion systems behind how they're getting here.
There are great people in the world that spend most of their time and energy releasing vital information about ET life to the masses. But with the help of each and every one of you, the message can spread like wildfire.